and I'm just about to do an interview with Hannibal TV. Arriba!
This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today, as my special guest, I have WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana, former WWE Intercontinental Champion. He's wrestled for the AWA, he's wrestled everywhere, which we're going to get into throughout the course of this interview. One of the wrestlers that's aged the best over the years. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very good. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I don't know if you remember it too well, but you did wrestle for me once many years ago against Jim Neidhart in Alberta.
I do remember that we didn't have a good turnout.
Yeah, and it wasn't exactly one of your matches with Savage either.
No, no. Oh, Neidhart wasn't a smooth worker.
No. It's unfortunate he passed. I guess I may as well ask you about it now. Any memories of Jim Neidhart better than that night? Because I think that night he headbutted you in the balls or something off of a. You were trying to do a leapfrog, and I think he nailed you in the balls.
Yeah, I just think, you know, the Anvil was battling, with pain pills and stuff like that. That he was, and sometimes he wasn't all there, And I think that was one of the nights where I don't know what the deal was. I didn't ask him, but he wasn't the same Anvil that I had known in the past.
Now, as far as your athletic career, I believe you started off as a football player when you were in your youth. Is that right?
Yes, I did. I started playing football in Texas when I was a freshman in high school.
And you became recruited to West Texas State, a university known for its wrestlers who played football, I guess.
Yes, I did. And, Terry Funk played football there, and so did Tully Blanchard and uh, Million Dollar Man, Manny Fernandez. I mean, there was a whole bunch. I'm sure you know. The list goes on and on.
Were you on the same team as any of those guys at the same time as they played?
Me and Tully Blanchard and the Million Dollar Man played during the same time.
Okay. I had a fan that told me to ask you, I guess there was something that happened between you and Ted DiBiase in the parking lot, I guess, back in those days.
Not that I ever remember.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean
Okay.
that's just a rumor.
What are your thoughts on everything going on with Ted now? I guess there's a big scandal for, I guess, his ministries accepting several $1 million worth of money that was meant to go to help feed the poor.
Well, I don't know if it's true or not, but if it's true, you're using the Lord's name to get ahead, and then something like this happens. To me, I don't have a lot of respect for something like that. It's how much money is enough? I mean, why do you have to rob from people to further yourself?
Any favorite match with Ted over the years? I know you worked with him a lot.
Well, as the wrestling world knows, DiBiase was one of the best heels in the business. I pretty much enjoyed every match that nothing stands, uh, on my mind right now. When I switched to become a Matador, I was supposed to come out with a big angle with him, and then it was dropped. I would have loved to have had a feud with Ted, because both of us would have been you know good workers, and we would have done good in a feud.
Definitely. And I guess from there, you ended up being recruited to the CFL where you played for the BC Lions up here in Canada.
Yes, I was a free agent with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I spent 10 weeks there, and then I got cut, and then I ended up with the BC Lions, and I spent the rest of the year in 1975 and played pretty much the whole year in 1976, and I was supposed to go back, but I got into wrestling and just never went back.
How was the pay for the Kansas City Chiefs at that time, even though it was only 10 weeks? Now that would amount to a lot of money, obviously, with the salaries these days.
Well, back then, it was a lot different. I signed a contract for $18,000 for the year, which and there were some guys that were making less than I was. If you were making $100,000 then that was a lot of money.
And for CFL, I'm guessing the pay wasn't great either if you ended up going into wrestling instead of continuing on with football.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did get the first year full year, I had a $20,000 a year contract, which it was up from Kansas City, but it's a brutal sport, and to be making that kind of money, and then I started wrestling and started making the same kind of money, and knowing that a wrestler's career lasted a lot longer than a football player's career, it was an easy decision for me to make the decision when I, stopped playing football and went into wrestling.
Were you recruited into wrestling by your fellow Texas or West Texas State alumni?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Tully Blanchard's father and Tully Blanchard started talking to me my junior year, and I wasn't a wrestling fan. I never watched wrestling. I wasn't interested, but Joe Blanchard threw up some figures that were way more uh, potential than I would have had as far as playing football. And after I played my second year in football, after my first year, I told Tully I want to play one more year, and then I want to break in. My intention was to just do it uh, in the off season from football, but you know, if you're going to go into wrestling and if you want to make it, you got to go 100%. And once I went for it, I decided to stay with it.
I see. And what was the training like in those days to be a pro wrestler? I know it was usually a very protected business, but I imagine if Tully and his father recruited you directly, that maybe it would have been a little easier for you to break in.
Well, it was a little easier. I was trained by Hiro Matsuda. Hiro Matsuda. I went to Florida. Me and Tully went to Florida at the same time. He had already been wrestling, so he just jumped in and he was on the card. Well, I was just learning. I was just working out in the ring with Hiro Matsuda, and Barry Orton was also working out. So Barry Orton's father got in the ring with him and I. So uh, I really didn't really get smart until a few workouts. But luckily the fact that Terry Funk knew me and Tully Blanchard, uh, uh, Hiro Matsuda kind of took it easy on me compared to what I heard that he did with some of the other guys.
There was the rumor that he actually broke Hulk Hogan's leg, but we have heard over the years that Hogan tends to exaggerate things. Do you think that the leg was actually broken, or was it more of a maybe a sprain or something like that?
I don't think, I don't know, but I never heard at the time that anybody's leg was broken. So but I wasn't there, so
Right.
who knows? But I don't think it was broken.
Because Lex Luger was also trained by him, and I think Luger said similar to you. Well, the cardio and the squats and everything was tough. He wouldn't really rough you guys up too much if he respected you.
Yeah, the training was tough. Luckily I was an athlete, and I knew that to make it in professional sports, you had to earn it and pay the price. Back then, if you broke in, you earned the right to be a wrestler.
Did you work in Florida at all before you went back down to Southwest Championship Wrestling?
Uh, I never went back to. I never wrestled for Tully Blanchard in Texas. I
Okay,
I ended up having about 4 matches, and then I went to Atlanta from there. Uh,
okay.
and then I started working pretty much regularly after about, let me see, I'm going to say 2 or 3 months. I was in Atlanta on the card, learning.
Now, Bruiser Brody was another West Texas State alumni. Did you ever run into him at all when you were working the circuits?
The only time I wrestled with Bruiser Brody, and I was in the AWA, and by that time I had, pretty good experience, and I was able to, take care of myself in the ring a little bit. Uh, you know, he was from West Texas State. I was from West Texas State, and he was a scary looking guy, and we were in the middle of the card, and I enjoyed working with him. He was over big time, but I think he was over big time in Japan more than anywhere else.
And you mentioned you worked the Atlanta territory. That was one of the bigger territories at the time. How was your experience there?
Well, it was on fire, and I was just learning. And what I tell a lot of the young guys now is I was able to uh, I was able to, every night that I wrestled, I was wrestling with somebody that was better than me, and they were always teaching me, and I was learning from the guys. And I mean, you had Dick Slater, you had Wrestling Two, you had the Heels, the Anderson brothers, you had Don Cornoodle, Macho Man. We were underneath cards, and we were able to teach each other quite a bit and learn. And we were making a lot of mistakes because all of us were kind of pretty wet behind the ear, but we were learning pretty much every night. For me, they were better than me because they had more experience than me, so I was learning from them.
And I guess Ole Anderson probably would have been booking at that time.
Ole Anderson and Gene, his brother, were the bookers.
How did you get along with them? I've heard mixed
Uh,
reports.
you know, I have no respect for Ole. I can't stand him. He didn't know how to treat people right. He was kind of made racist remarks towards me and Mexicans, and you know he he knew the power that he had as a booker, and I think he abused it. I never really cared for him.
When you say racist remarks, what type of remarks, for instance?
Well, just come out right and call you, "Hey, Mexican, come here," or
Oh,
like,
so I
I'm,
guess that may have
I'm,
soured your experience.
yeah, yeah.
Did you ever confront him over that, or was it more he's the boss? And in those days, I guess, unfortunately, that was more acceptable talk than it is today.
Yeah, no, I just accepted the fact that he was the boss, and I was learning. I wasn't gonna uh, I wasn't gonna burn the bridge where I was working at. I was still getting the opportunity. I was still making a living, and I knew that I was gonna get some experience there. I just like I knew Tully Blanchard, but Tully Blanchard went one way and I went another way, and we were never in the same territory. So I just knew as an athlete, if you work hard enough, you climb the ladder, and that was my intention the whole time.
When you were training with Tully Blanchard and knew him in his younger days, was he already the partier that he later gained the reputation for being like a big time guy on the party scene in wrestling?
I no, not in. I didn't know Tully. I didn't hang out with him. He was a heel back then. The business was protected. So I didn't hang out with Tully, so I had no idea what he was doing. Uh, I wasn't even traveling with him when I was in Florida. I was in the ring and he was, out on the road, and it just I didn't hang with him.
I understand that the Junkyard Dog was one of the wrestlers you did hang out with a little bit in the earlier days. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I met Junkyard Dog. I think it was my second trip to Atlanta, Georgia. I went from Atlanta to North Carolina to Amarillo for a couple of months. Then I came back to New York. Then I went to the AWA, and then I went back to Atlanta. And JYD was already a big star in Louisiana, and he came into the Omni. And when I first met him, I mean, he was a very nice guy. And all of a sudden, I started getting booked in Louisiana, and he would pick me up at the airport, and he would drop me off. Never complained. He would give you the shirt off his sleeve, and I was very appreciative of JYD and the way he treated me and all the wrestlers.
Do you think if he had kept his act together behind the scenes a little bit better, he could have been a star nationwide on a similar level to Hulk Hogan? Because I understand he was that big of a star in Bill Watts's territory.
And when I was going to Bill Watts, every arena was sold out. Uh, he without a doubt, if he would have kept it together, he would have been as big a star as there is. I wouldn't doubt it if they wouldn't have put the world title on him. In New York. I mean, he was over, and he got over big time in New York also. I mean, he could talk, and he had charisma coming out of the yang yang.
And you mentioned that you were also in the American Wrestling Association. What was your experience overall like wrestling up there for Vern Gagne?
Well, Vern Gagne, I found it. You could live like a normal life. You didn't wrestle every night. You'd wrestle maybe 200 days a year. In the summer, business was slow, so he wouldn't run too many shows, and you could have a normal life. He'd run a big show, and there'd be only 5 matches, but every match every match could have been a main event all over the country. He had nothing but top stars there, and the fact that I was around all these top stars, I learned in the ring, and I learned how to do interviews, just by listening to the guys talk.
Who were some of your favorite opponents from those years in AWA?
Well, my first angle in the AWA was against Ednan Al Qaisi. We did an angle. He had a girl that would come out and dance with him, and uh, do the whatever dance they do, and we ended up doing an angle, and there was a great experience. That was the first time that I was involved in a feud, and I realized, when you're in a feud, you have something to talk about. It makes it a lot easier when you do your interviews. Like it's a shoot, it's like a reel. You're talking about, almost like a fight, and it was a great learning experience. But I mean, I wrestled against John Studd. I wrestled against I think Baron von Raschke was a heel at some point. Uh, Dino Bravo. I mean, and then me and Rick Martel ended up teaming up, and we went against the high flyers, and I mean, we had some great matches, and you know, that was a great experience. Also, I mean, we had 1 hour matches with the high flyers, me and Rick Martel, and I learned a lot. There was a great, I had been in the business about 3.5 years when I got to the AWA, and it was a great experience for me.
Did you ever wrestle Mad Dog Vachon when you were in that territory?
No, no, Mad Dog Vachon was a baby face, and I mean, with a face like his, and the way he talked and the way he worked. I mean, but the people loved him. He was a heel all the way, but he was a legit. He could kick some butt. That guy.
Oh yeah, I've heard he has an undefeated bar fight record.
Yeah, I mean I mean, well, from what I understand, he wrestled in the Olympics, you know,
Yes.
and he was legit, and he wouldn't back down from nobody.
Did you ever wrestle Jerry Blackwell?
Uh, no, I didn't get the honor of wrestling Jerry Blackwell, but you know, there is another guy who, you know, was on fire. You know, you know, I got there and he was getting beat, you know, all the time, and he would keep bragging undefeated, undefeated, and you know, people started buying it, and all of a sudden, you know, he'd get beat, but he keeps saying that he was undefeated and you know, and never been beat, and you know, all of a sudden, you know, he gets over like, you know, Vern had a pretty great mind for the business, so he was over like $1 million.
And you mentioned that you had a shorter stint in, I guess it would have been called maybe WWF at the time. How was that experience?
Well, at the beginning, I had only been in the business. You know, here's a guy that came from Mission, Texas, population 14,000 people. Uh, After about, I would say, 3 years, I make my debut in Madison Square Garden. You know, it was unbelievable feeling, and you know, the talent was different. The wrestling was different. This was a big man territory. You know, Bruno Sammartino was a powerful man, and he wrestled against you know, huge heels that he went up against, and you know, to be able to wrestle in arenas, you know, 20,000 people, 24,000 people in Madison Square Garden, Baltimore, you know, huge arena, Philadelphia, huge arena, Washington D.C., Nassau Coliseum. I mean, anywhere else you didn't have those kinds of attendance, you know, and to be wrestling in front of those crowds, you know, was a great experience.
Was Billy Graham around at that time?
No, I met Billy Graham when I was first getting started in 1977. Uh, he was I think he was on his way to New York, if I'm not mistaken. But I was, man, I was impressed with the body and the way you know, his interviews were second to none.
Where did you first meet Andre the Giant? Because I understand you two were fairly close.
The first time I ever met Under the Giant was when I decided to get into professional wrestling. He came to Texas and he was wrestling in San Antonio, and I had to referee his match. And I just, you know, they didn't smarten me up. Even as a wrestler, they didn't smarten me up, and you know, I was scared to death of Andre. But we became close. Then when I went to Atlanta and he flew into it, you know, into Atlanta to do all the battle royals, he would do like 2 or 3 weeks of battle royals in Atlanta. Only told me to go pick him up at the airport, and I had a little Granada, and I picked him up, and I picked David Von Erich, who was about 6'6", 6'7", and Andre was in the front seat, and my little Granada had bucket seats, and Andre gets in the car and he leans back and he breaks my seat. So I ended up having to trade my car in. Uh, but if Andre liked you, he liked you. If he didn't like you, I mean, you'd know. And he liked playing cards with me, and I enjoyed playing cards with him. We played gin rummy or we played cribbage, and you had to keep Andre entertained.
Did you ever go out with him to eat or drink?
Yes, I did. Yeah, but I didn't try to keep up with him.
What was the most you ever saw him drink in a sitting? Because we've heard many stories over the years.
Well, I didn't experience it, but I heard that he had 116 beers. But if you see him hold a beer, it looks like a shot glass, you know, in his hands. I mean, his hands were like, I mean, they were like catcher's mitts, you know, like a paw, you know. And uh, he was a big man, and you know, and you know, he drank all the time. from what I understand later on, Arnold Skolin in New York, I found out that the reason he was drinking so much is because he was in so much pain. I didn't realize, uh, what his body, the change of his body with the disease that he had was going through, but supposedly it was pretty painful.
Would they allow him to drink in the dressing room in those days? Would it be no big deal if he wanted to do that?
Yeah, yeah, Andre could do it, whatever he wanted to do. I mean, but I mean, the guy was a businessman. He always went in the ring. He was always there, and he always performed.
Is it true that he really held something against Big John Studd?
Uh, I I I just know for a fact that I remember we were doing the TV taping, and one of the top matches there was Andre against John Studd. They had a feud going on. The Giants. I from what I understand, I heard rumors. I don't know if it's true or not, but he wasn't too happy when John Studd started going in the ring. Climbing the top rope. Because up until then, Andre was the only one who ever climbed over the top rope. But man, I remember Andre, having the finish and chasing John Studd, and I mean John Studd would go through the locker room and he'd keep on running. He'd leave the building. No, he Andre wasn't anybody to mess with.
I understand that it was Andre that got you your job in the WWE for your long run that you had there.
Well, I was in. I started out in Georgia. I went to Charlotte. Then I went to Amarillo, Texas. That's where I went to college, and they Black Jack Mulligan and Dick Murdoch promised me they were going to give me a big push and make me an intercontinental star. And when I get there, by that time I had been in the business, close to 2.5, 3 years, but I knew the business. And my first TV taping was against Stan Lane, and he was also coming in new, and Dick Mulligan wasn't there, and I believe Mulligan did want to give me a big push, but Dick Murdoch was a baby face, and he probably wanted to make sure that I didn't get over. So I go on my first TV taping, and he made me and Stan Lane go 10-minute draw. And I realized, I said, if they're going to give me a big push, 10-minute draw on TV with an unknown, you know, it's not the way to go. I only lasted about 2 months there. And Andre came by. Uh, Again, like I said, Andre would come in and business would pop because he would start doing the battle royals all over the place. And by that time, I had become close friends. Whenever Andre would be around, he'd travel with me. I would pick him up at the airports. I would drive him around. I'd hang out with him at night. He even stayed in my apartment, and I let him sleep in my bed. Uh, I told Andre that I wasn't happy, that they were treating me like crap and lying to me, and I wasn't happy there. And I had no idea that him and Mario Savoldi gave him a tape, and he brought it to. He was on his way to New York. I didn't even know that, and he showed Vince Senior a tape of me. So, as you know, in this business is very hard to make it, but it's who you know. If you have somebody that has power and can can help you, that's the easiest way you're going to make it. It's very hard to make it totally on your own because there's so many talented guys out there.
That's very true. And for Dick Murdoch being the booker and kind of squashing your promised push, we've heard that he was allegedly a member of the KKK and allegedly didn't like African American wrestlers. Do you think it may have been because you are Mexican that there was an issue, or was it just another reason, like he may just not have liked you for whatever reason?
No, I think the fact that if he would have given me a push and there were so many Mexicans, he was worried that I'd get over more than he was. That's what I see. Yeah, I never saw but Tony Atlas told me that he saw that he carried a card, a KKK card. Tony says, I don't trust him. I'll never turn my back on him.
Yeah, Rocky Johnson mentioned something about that to me too before he passed away, so it very well could be true. So when you finally got your big run in WWE with Vince Jr., were there any promises made to you when you came into that territory?
No, when I first came in, I came in with Vince Senior,
Okay.
and I was just happy to be coming in. Leaving Amarillo, Texas, where I was barely making enough money to pay the rent. I wasn't making any money. And then to come to New York and start making some pretty decent money and wrestling in big houses. He never made me any promises. He just gave me an opportunity, and uh, I climbed the ladder pretty soon. I was teaming up with Ivan Putski and got the tag team titles, and he just gave me an opportunity, and I ran with it.
I did an interview with Ivan recently. He seems like a fairly nice guy now, anyways. What were your experiences like being tag partners with him?
Well, I was smart enough to. Ivan was over so big. I was really, really young in the business, but when I got teamed up with him, it elevated my career right away. All of a sudden, I'm a world tag team champion with Ivan Putski. I'm at the same level as him, and I'm known all over the world in Japan and the Middle East. You know, I became a known commodity all over the place. Uh, he was the power. I mean, Ivan was a powerful guy. I was the wrestler. Usually I was the one that did the selling, and a lot of the guys would try to dig. So him and Ike would have problems, but I understood my position, and I would sell, and Andrew would he would make the comeback, and some once in a while he'd sell a little bit, but Ivan just didn't sell very good, so it was a lot easier for the heels to get more sympathy on me.
Were you working in that company when Vince Sr. passed away?
Yes, yes.
What was the atmosphere like between the time, like, as the crossover was happening from when Vince Sr. was in charge to Vince Jr. taking over? Was there some people thinking that it might not be a good thing that Jr. was taking over?
Well, yeah, everybody, everybody, you know, even the guys that became agents used to knock Vince Jr. He doesn't know what he's doing. He ran the magazines. He wouldn't allow the magazines in the locker room. He wouldn't allow the magazines in the building, other magazines. Well, nobody knew that he was going to start his own magazine. Uh, I was there when we found out that Vince Senior had gotten sick, and uh, he had a meeting. They brought all the wrestlers together, and he made an announcement that he was giving up wrestling, and Vince Jr. was taking over, and boy, did he take over! I mean, he took over that meeting, and we went from calling him Vinny to calling him Vince. There was nobody calling him Vinny anymore. He became our boss. Right there on the spot.
Was there some concern when Vince started moving into other people's territories that, for instance, if you're working with WWF at this time, maybe by jumping into other people's territories, you're going to get heat in the future if you lose your job or anything like that?
No, you know, at the time there were territories, right? I mean, and you worked for the guy. I was working for Vince, and I was loyal to Vince when I was in Atlanta. I was loyal to Ole as much as I hated him. I was going to do whatever I could to I never had a position to where I could draw some money, but you know, wrestlers are loyal to the hand that feeds you. We were everybody was there we kept hearing that the problem was Ole Anderson was the one that came into to one of the New York towns, and I think it was in Virginia somewhere, and he wrestled in one of his towns first. So then, everything was open. That if you come into my territory, you know, Vince had a plan. Ole didn't have a plan. Vince had a plan, and he must have had some big money behind him because we'd come into the locker room and okay, we're going into Minneapolis. We're taking over Atlanta. We're taking over Louisiana. We're taking over. It's like every 3 weeks we come in and we were going into a different TV area and kept growing.
I see. Now, as far as you being a celebrity, obviously wrestling was big. You were popular in all the towns that you were working in. But when did you start to notice the national and international celebrity from working for the WWF?
Uh, Probably right before WrestleMania one. Right before WrestleMania one, we were drawing big crowds, uh, and it just exploded. It just exploded all of a sudden. Uh, like we were turning people away in all the different town. We were in California. It wasn't overnight. I mean, we used to go to LA, 20,000 capacity arena. We'd have maybe 1,500 people. But everybody worked hard, and uh, Pat Patterson. I think George Scott was the booker. They had great storylines, and it just kept going up and up and up. And I happened to be in a great feud during that time. I think it was '85 with Greg the Hammer Valentine. I mean, there was pretty much everywhere we went. There'd be 20,000 people inside the arena and 20,000 that couldn't get in. It was just unbelievable. I never saw anything like it, and probably will never see anything like that again.
How was Greg to work with as an opponent?
Greg was like a pit bull. I mean, he would just keep coming. He'd fight you and fight you and fight you, and you. I was lucky that I was in pretty good shape, and I would sell. But when it came time for me to fire back, I'd fire back, and he would take it. He would dish it out, and he would take it, and that's why people enjoyed our matches because we used to have some dog fights.
And he's told me firsthand he never liked doing jobs. Did you ever have any issues with him not wanting to put you over in any matches, or were you too close enough that it was never a factor?
Well, when he took the title, uh, I chased him for about a year and a half. I mean, we had all kinds of matches. Finally, ended up in the cage match. So we got the most out of that angle, and he knew that I was going to be getting the title back. But I never, he never did a job for me. He would get disqualified. He would get counted out. He would, you know, have outside interference. So we'd have all kinds of gimmick matches. We had our Broadways. We had curfew in Madison Square Garden where uh, at 11 o'clock, the wrestling had to stop. So they had to stop our match because it was 11 o'clock. We came back in a no curfew match. Uh, so you're right. He didn't like to do jobs. When you would do jobs, it was known that, you were not being used right.
And of course, you had that famous match in London, Ontario, where I don't even think WWE holds events in that town anymore. But any memories of that cage match?
Uh, no, I honestly don't believe that I remember. The only cage match that I remember, and I know I had several cage matches, but the only one I remember was the one in Baltimore.
And is it true that your wife threw out the Intercontinental title that Greg Valentine destroyed?
No, it wasn't. It was me. I
Okay.
had I had it in my gym, the green Intercontinental title, and I had it for about 10 years. and he was just laying on the floor, laying on the floor, laying on the floor. And pretty soon I said, "Man, that's junk." And I mean, to have known what I know now, that that belt is very valuable. It probably rotted already, some junkyard, But I mean, that was. I bet you I could get $30,000-$40,000 for that now.
Oh yes, with the collectors because people buy replica belts for thousands.
Yeah, I mean, I kicked myself in the butt.
As far as your WrestleMania 1 match, you have the distinction of having the first ever WrestleMania match. I think you wrestled Playboy Buddy Rose under a mask. What was that experience like for you?
Well, Playboy Buddy Rose was a great worker. He was a little on the heavy side when he came there, but he could still move. Uh, I wasn't very happy that I was the opening match when I first walked into the arena because we didn't know the order of the matches, uh, and when or who I was going to be wrestling against. I was disappointed because at the time, me and Valentine had a real hot feud. We were selling out arenas without Hogan being on the card. And when I find out I'm in the opening match, not wrestling Greg, JYD was wrestling Greg. It was pretty disappointing to me. Right before I went through the curtain, uh, I have an attitude, not a good attitude. And then Vince comes up next to me and he says, "The reason you're number one is because I need you to go out there and get the people off their ass and set the tempo for the rest of the night." And right there, like my attitude changed. I had a different outlook of my position.
I heard you say in another interview that you were paid $7,500 for that match. Would that have been your lowest WrestleMania pay?
No, no. Well, I got 7,500, I believe, and I complained, and I got another 7,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I complained about my payoff because I wasn't happy, you know. So they ended up doubling my pay.
Because in those days, and I think it still works like this to a certain extent this day, you're also paid by where you are on the card. So opening match would have been lower than if you'd been mid card. So I guess that might have been one of the reasons you also would have been upset about being in the first match.
Yeah, and the payoffs weren't that big. I mean, Bundy was in the main event on WrestleMania, wrestling Hulk, and got $50,000. In the main event. I think WrestleMania 2, or well, I don't know which one it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
You know, Hogan got I think Hogan got 500,000 and Bundy got 50,000.
I
You know,
see.
it just wasn't fair.
What did you think about the celebrities being used, such as Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T?
Well, I don't think the wrestlers were very happy because we knew that the celebrities were getting more money than we were. You know,
Right.
and we didn't think that they were uh, drawing any wrestling fans. The wrestling fans didn't come see Mr. T or Cyndi Lauper. They were part of the show. And we didn't understand that. Now it became a spectacle and it became a show. Back then we just weren't accepting it.
And you had some matches with Dr. D. David Schultz. How was he to work with?
He was another guy that was, you know, he would eat you up if you wouldn't fight back. So luckily I had experience and I knew how to sell, but I would fight back, and people saw that they knew that I was experienced, and uh, they would sell for me also. I never had a problem with him. He was funny because he was always coming in. I almost beat this person up. I almost beat this person up, and I would say, "Doctor, who did you beat up today?" And he always had problems. That guy.
Were you backstage when you had that incident with Ron Stossel?
I don't know what's happening to my phone, but I hope we're okay. No, I was backstage, but I didn't see it. You know, I didn't hear anything about it until it was too late.
Okay. Yeah, there seems to be some feedback on the phone. Um, as far as your feud with Macho Man, that was one of your most memorable feuds. How was it to be in the ring with him?
Well, Macho Man was a great worker. I just wish we would have had a longer feud. You know, I think they cut the feud short because they had bigger plans for Macho Man and Elizabeth. He got over so big. I think getting the IC title for me uh, put him way on top. Pretty fast. But he was a great worker. I mean, he was a pleasure to work with.
We've heard from guys like Ricky Steamboat, and I think even Hulk Hogan said it, that Macho Man liked to plan out his matches from start to finish. Was he like that with you, or were you guys more calling it on the fly?
Uh, the very one time in Pittsburgh, he came out with about 3 pages, and he forgot it. Like he didn't come in with a lot of experience, Macho Man. He hadn't been used to working with the New York style. Uh, After the first time that he brought out the pages, for some reason we didn't use we didn't use any scripts. But I do understand that I remember he brought out a script, George Steele, and George Steele just took it and ripped it up and said, "I don't do scripts. I go out there and you let George do George stuff. You work his gimmick."
There was a fan that commented that they saw you wrestle Macho Man in Puerto Rico in 1985, and there was a rainstorm, and most of the crowd left because of the storm, but you guys still went out there and put on a five-star match. Do you remember that match?
Yes, I do. It was the first time that I had gone into Puerto Rico, and you know, I don't know if Vince was intending on taking over Puerto Rico, but uh, they were afraid that Hulk Hogan would get hurt, so they put on Hulk before intermission, and Hulk got on and wrestled and got the plane and came back, and me and Macho Man were on last, and we it was a very slippery ring, and it was pouring. I mean, you could barely see each other, but we did have a good match. We were very careful, but we had a good match.
Did you ever notice any of the unusual stuff backstage with Macho Man and Elizabeth over the years that we've heard Honky Tonk Man and other wrestlers tell stories about?
No, I never noticed it because he kept her away from our locker rooms. I know that he was very protective, and uh, but I never noticed. I'd be lying to you if I'd say I saw this or I saw that. I never saw anything. I know that you know I, I was always pretty polite to Elizabeth, and I never had a problem with Macho Man.
How was the backstage environment in WWE in the 80s? Because we've heard that there was a lot of cliques and sometimes there would be cruel ribs played and so forth.
Well, the dressing room was wrestling is a fraternity, as you know. I mean, you're part of it. No matter who you are, if you're a wrestler, you're part of the fraternity and you're accepted. Uh, but there were cliques, and the baby face would step a baby face if they could climb the ladder. Like a baby face, I'm considered a baby face. I wasn't competing against the heels, so I would worry about other baby faces stabbing me in the back. Same thing with the heels. The heels would worry about heels stabbing each other in the back, and there were some pretty brutal uh, ribs played. That were not very nice in a lot of cases. I remember, and I didn't even know who did it, but somebody chief had a son that was breaking in, and he was allergic to coffee, and they they cut one of his legs, and he had to wear his jeans, one leg cut off, and they put the coffee in his pants, and you know, they would. I didn't think that stuff was very nice, but that's the boys.
That would have been probably the Bulldogs, I guess.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Did you ever witness any of the backstage fights? I think the Bulldogs had the one with the Rougeos when you were around, and I think Billy Jack Haynes was in one, and Danny Spivey, but I don't know if you were on those cards.
The only one that I was in, Dan Spivey and Adrian Adonis. We were in, I think we were in Peoria, Illinois, and I think Adrian Adonis was a bit of a bully, and he had been taking advantage of him and Mike Rotundo, and I remember Dan Spivey telling Arnold Skaaland, if he messes with me tonight, I'm going to knock him out. And Adrian Adonis was supposed to go over. So uh, Spivey did, he knocked him out in the ring, and Spivey went over the top rope and got disqualified. So that's how Adrian got his hand up, and then he came into the locker room and he walked right into it, and Spivey just beat the living heck out of Adrian. I kind of felt bad.
How did you get along with Hulk Hogan over the years?
Pretty good. We started at the same time. We'd give each other advice at the beginning, and I mean, I was very lucky. I was in the territories that he was in, so wherever he was at, business got good, and business was on fire, and we got along great.
And what about the Ultimate Warrior?
The Ultimate Warrior didn't have too many friends. He got along with the Kerry Von Erich. He didn't respect the business. He got it. He was very not a good worker. He used to hurt guys and made a lot of money.
You were in that Survivor Series finale in 1990 with the Warrior and Hogan. What was that experience like working with them?
Oh, that was a great experience. That was for me to be put in a 6-man tag with those two guys. To me it was an honor that'll last a lifetime.
Did you ever have any issues with Jesse Ventura calling you Chico, or was that something that you liked?
No, it was a work. It never bothered me. Jesse was over like $1 million by him calling me Chico. I knew that it helped my career.
I've heard Jesse say you were one of his favorite all-time opponents. What was your experience like wrestling him?
Well, I used to love to wrestle him because I mean, he had great psychology in the ring. We used to work against each other and go about 10 minutes without even touching each other, and the fans were ready to come in and kill him. He used to know how to get heat. Which it's something that people don't know how to do anymore. The way he used to get it, so it was nice. And he would never hurt you.
And it's safe to say he's one of the most successful wrestlers of all time for his political and movie careers. What are your thoughts on all of his success over the years?
Well, I think he was very successful because he was a very intelligent man, and didn't back down from the promoters. And if he had something to say, he would say it to them. From what I understand, you know, God bless him. It's like the baseball players. People complain about the salaries. Well, obviously the money's there. So for Jesse the Body to get whatever he could, the money was there. You know, there was a few guys that weren't afraid to bark.
And they put you in a tag team with Rick Martel as Strike Force. Oh, there's some feedback. What were your thoughts on working as Strike Force with Rick Martel?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but he was teamed up with Tom Zink, and they were getting over pretty good. I forgot what they used to call him, but
Can-Am connection.
Can-Am Connection. But all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, he picked up his bags and he left. And Vince came up and asked me if I would mind teaming up with Rick Martel, and they weren't doing anything with me at the time. So I said, of course, I don't mind. It would put me in the spotlight again, and I'd start making some decent money for a while again.
Have you been in contact with Martel at all lately? Because I've heard he doesn't want anything to do with wrestling anymore.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Rick in a while. I don't have any idea what. There's got to be something that went wrong for Rick Martel not to be in the Hall of Fame. Something happened between him and the office, and I don't know. Who knows?
And when you ultimately broke up with him and he became a heel, how did you like wrestling him?
I love wrestling him. He was a great worker. I mean, he was a night off, and he did a pretty good job with that model gimmick.
Is it true you wanted to be heel?
Yeah, before he came back, I asked Vince. I said, Vince, Rick is coming back. Is there any way that I can be the heel? And Vince says, no, you're going to be the baby face. I didn't realize that they had already planned this whole model thing probably for months, because he came back with, the model gimmick and he was doing the interviews, fantastic. Rick was never a good interview guy, but all of a sudden he's doing a great job with the model.
And as far as your match with the Undertaker in Spain, what was that experience like?
Well, it was a great experience. I knew something was happening for me to go over against the Undertaker. I beat him, but Undertaker was a great worker. I mean, he never complained, and God, what a run he's had.
Yes. What do you think about his longevity as a character?
I think it speaks volumes of his work. I mean, I saw him work with Rey Mysterio, who's about 5'5", 5'6", and had great matches with the guy. Made the fans believe that there was a contest going on.
There was some issue with you and Shawn Michaels on an airplane. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, I mean, uh, uh, I was sitting. I never forget. I was sitting on 4D. I don't know why I remember 4D, but it's the seat that I had. And uh, I got up to get something out of my bag that overhead that I had to put like a couple of rows back. And then when I did whatever I had to do in my bag, Sean was sitting on my seat, and I said, Sean, that's the seat that I was sitting at. And the stewardess came over, and I told him, I said, I got up, and he sat on my seat. So they made him get up, and he ended up sitting right behind me, 5D. And all of a sudden, I hear him saying, uh, he said, don't you ever talk to me that way again. And he said it twice, and I realized this. I said, are you talking to me? I turned around and said, are you talking to me? And he said, yeah. And I said, Sean, I said, I'll kick your butt. I said, this is not a work. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. This was my seat. And then he just got quiet. But we never had anything after that. He cooled off, and I cooled, I cooled off. But when I said, I'll kick your butt, he says, get in line. He knew that he knew that all the guys hated him. He wasn't well liked. I think the more he matured, the more he became. I don't know. I left, so I don't know what happened with Sean.
Are you surprised that he got the big push that he ended up getting with all of those backstage problems? Because that wouldn't fly with pretty much anyone else.
No, I don't. I'm not surprised. The first thing is, he was very talented. You know, and he got a big push. At that time there were so many workers, so many great workers that they could have pushed anybody. But he was talented, and he got over like $1 million.
And as far as Scott Hall, I understand you came up with the Razor Ramon name. Is that true?
Well, I came out with Ramon because I was in the urinal in the bathroom, and uh, Razor said that him and Kurt were talking to Vince, and he runs through the door in the toilet, and I'm urinating, and he says, "Tito, I need a name that rhymes with Razor," and I said Ramon, and he just dashed out of the locker room and went and told Vince, and that's what it was.
Were you friends with Scott outside the ring, or was he just looking for you because you were Spanish and would probably have a good name?
Yeah, just looking for me because I was Spanish, and we respected each other. The boys were, even if you, I don't know if you have a brother, you might fight with your brother, but at the end, you respect each other, and it doesn't last forever. And there were some disagreements, but we were still like it's a brotherhood.
Did you ever work with Scott in the ring?
Uh, I had just a couple of matches. He was pretty stiff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that in WWE when he was first coming in?
Yeah, I had to take his finish one time, only one time. Thank God, because he'd pick you up, backwards and all the way to the behind him, and drop you, on your neck, and that hurt. And I said, "There's no way I'm going to take it." If they would have asked me, I wouldn't have taken it again.
Is it true around the time that they made Bret Hart champion that you were also in consideration to getting that big push at that time, but for whatever reason, they ultimately chose Hart?
Well, uh, I was told Bruce Pritchard and Pat Patterson, a couple other guys told me that they were grooming me to be the world champion. And Pat Patterson says we're going to go into Mexico, South America, Spain. So they were planning on going over into all these Latin countries, and all of a sudden they changed their plans, and all of a sudden I'm out of the picture. So that's the way it went.
One thing I noticed is how quickly they kind of dropped you down the card where you were in a position basically just putting other people over and making other people look good. Was that kind of demoralizing because you'd been used pretty well up until that point, and then your last year and a half, 2 years, it kind of changed?
Yeah, I mean that's why. Well, I don't know when the run with the Strike Force ran out, uh, but I did. Yeah, all of a sudden, and Vincent. I mean, I had been in the WWE longer than anybody else had, and Vincent told me, he says, Tito, your career stays from the middle to the top. You've been up and down, up and you never go below. But at the end, all of my buddies, they had fired all of my buddies or let everybody go, and I was one of the last ones to last there, and I just wasn't happy, just making ends meet, so I was just ready to go.
Was there ever any contact with you in WCW after your WWE run ended? I know you worked for them a couple shots here and there, but what about a full-time deal?
Yeah, Vince Russo wanted to talk to me, but I told him I wasn't interested in going on the road anymore.
What about Eric Bischoff?
Uh, or maybe it was Eric Bischoff who they wanted me to come to Houston, and they were going to make me an offer, and I said, I'm not interested in going out on the road. I spent too many years on the road. I want to be home.
When
When
you
I left WWE, I was done. I mean, I didn't want to be on the road anymore.
when you did that one WCW shot, I think in Buffalo, New York, how was that experience for you, and how was the backstage environment compared to WWE?
Well, it was completely different. It was. I didn't think it was as professional as the WWE. Uh, it was a good experience. We worked against Jarrett, me and Snuka and George Steele, and we all beat him. And uh, it was good. It was, I got a good payday and it was fun.
And speaking of Snuka, last question here. What are your thoughts on everything that's come out in recent years about Snuka's allegations regarding his ex-girlfriend, I guess?
Well, I've been asked that many questions, and I can't answer that because I would be guesstimating. I don't know for sure. It's all hearsay, and I would hate to make an accusation that's not real. I mean, you hear a lot of rumors, and you hear different rumors, not the same ones. So I just I wasn't there. I can't tell you what happened, and who knows.
Were you in WWE at the time that happened?
Yeah, I came back. I came back the second time to the WWE, May 10th, 1983. That's the night it happened, and it happened. The reason I remember it was because it was my birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I remember that.
What
When I
was the
when I woke up in the morning on the 11th, that's when I heard what happened. But no, nobody was saying it. It was like nobody was talking about anything about that.
and what was like nobody was talking? That was just the reaction. Nobody said anything. No one discussed it amongst each other. Because
No,
that would be a little shocking your first night in, and it's like,
right.
wow, something big happened.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. It was very quiet. Kayfabe.
And I guess because you were both baby faces, you probably never really worked with Snuka yourself in the ring.
Right. Yeah.
And if anyone wants to look you up on social media, do you have social media where they can follow you?
Well, Facebook.
Tito, how was the relationship between you and your daughter coming along? As a father, that must have been an emotional time for you to find out about her. So congratulations.
Yeah, well, there hasn't been much communication since she did her interview. I acknowledged, it was a total surprise when I found out. She got into professional wrestling, and
Oh, really?
yeah, and I wish her nothing but the best.
I think you were the one that sent me the clip of your father talking about you briefly. A fan had asked him the question on a live stream from
Yeah.
the captain, who I don't like the captain, but yeah, he always interferes in my interviews. But the funny thing is, anyone that saw that, the captain didn't even follow up on it, and it seemed like he wanted to talk about it more.
Yeah,
So
I
what
don't
did you
know.
get from it? Sorry.
It was just super brief. Like he just said, yeah, I found out she's my biological daughter. He found out that as he knows that I'm going into pro wrestling. He wished me the best of luck, and that was kind of it. So it was kind of like a real quick mention, but there wasn't much follow up on it after.
So he's aware that you've done it, that you've been working on it. Obviously, he did bring that up that he'd seen something of it.
I think he saw our interview was what he said. I haven't really talked to him at all since then, so I don't really know.
I would hope that once you get going, he would at least take some more interest in your career, because you do have more potential, considering your athletic background, and you have a lot of the tools to make it. So you would think that because he's been a wrestling person most of his life, he might be a little bit interested in that.
Yeah, I guess time will tell on that one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but we'll see. Maybe I'll have to try and interview him again now that I know you.
Yeah.
This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and with me today is a guest I've had on before, and you fans have wanted him back, and we have him back, former WWE Intercontinental Champion. He was in the first 9 WrestleManias, WWE Hall of Famer, none other than El Matador, Tito Santana. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing very good, thank you, and I do appreciate all the fans in Canada. it was great. Anytime I showed up in Canada, they were always behind me.
Did you have a favorite city in Canada to wrestle in?
I would say probably Toronto was my favorite city in Canada. You know, it was consistent, and I had so many great matches there. You know, like everywhere else, but you know, Toronto was a nice town. I really enjoyed the people there.
Yeah, and they also used to do all the little towns that surrounded Toronto. Now they don't do those as much for some reason. Do you know why WWE doesn't hit as many places as they used to?
I have no idea. My understanding is they're having a hard time drawing fans to their shows. You know, yourself, the product is not as good as it used to be. It's a different business. You know, the fans, you know, during Hulkamania era and then Stone Cold and The Rock. I mean, the fans used to mob the arenas, and you know they're having a hard time, getting a crowd.
You were a big star during the mid 80s when it probably had its biggest boom ever with Hulk Hogan leading the way, and you would often headline the B shows. What year do you think would have been your most successful year as far as having large crowds and making good money off of the gates?
Well, Greg the Hammer Valentine and I had the longest feud in the history of the WWF, and we were the main event in a lot of the big shows. You know, Madison Square Garden, Baltimore, Toronto, everywhere. Not only with Greg, but with Randy Macho Man without Hulk Hogan. So uh, I, I was in a lot of the B shows back then. The WWE or WWF used to have 3 shows a night, uh, and everybody wanted to be in Hulk Hogan's shows. But then after a while, we would meet up with Hogan, and he would say, "Man, I heard you guys showed up, sold out Detroit. I heard you sold out." Pretty much we sold out every arena in the country and in Canada without Hogan being on the card.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive back in those days that they would have 3 shows a night, and usually all 3 shows would be sold out for a while there in the mid 80s.
Yeah, we'd get to the arenas, and it was like going to a theme park. The fans would be circled around the arena, uh, kind of like they would circle the people trying to get into some popular rides, and they'd be 20,000 people inside, and we'd be turning away 20,000 people. It was an era of a few years. It lasted for quite a while, where the WWF was hot. We had the cartoon, we had so many stars. I just happened to be one of them. But anybody that you would name, we were all big time pros, and we were all very knowledgeable, and the psychology of the match, and it was fun.
Did you ever have any problems resisting the temptations of the road? So many of your fellow wrestlers your age have already passed away, but it seems like your name usually isn't involved in those partying stories that we hear about from those years.
Uh, I I, uh, I never got involved with the drugs. I used to, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I used to ask some of my friends, God, you got to take it easy on this, and then they would say, "Don't worry, I got it under control." Everybody had it under control. Yet a lot of people were depending on pretty strong drugs on the road, and uh, coming from a migrant family, being a migrant worker, I was working in the fields from the age of 7, and I just felt that I was working too hard to be blowing my money on drugs.
Yeah, that the amount of money that they would have been spending must have been pretty crazy.
Oh, I mean, a real good friend of mine was going through a couple $1,000s a week, and I used to say to myself, you got to pay for $2,000, and then you got to pay taxes on those $2,000 because we were getting paid cash, uh, and we had to settle our taxes ourselves at the end of the year. So that's why a lot of the guys ended up broke.
I guess you kept very good records of your road expenses and everything, and filed your taxes every year.
Yes. Oh no. I that was very important to me. Uh, we you know we took care of ourselves. If I had a partner like Rick Martel or different guys that I used to travel with, I used to like to share rooms to cut down on the expenses. We still had to pay for our own meals. We ended up splitting car rentals, and the only thing that WWF would pay for was our flights. Everything else was on us, and we weren't making. Hulk Hogan was making the big bucks. Everybody else, we weren't making the kind of money to be, just living like millionaires on the road.
David is watching and he wants to know if you ever wrestled Matt Bourne.
Yes, I did. I wrestled him as Matt Bourne, and I wrestled him as Doink the Clown. Talk about a talented guy that went too young. Uh, he was one of the best. He was a great heel.
Yeah, do you think they could have taken that Doink character further?
Well, I think Matt Matt was the first Doink, and I think he was having problems, and I think he was missing shows if I remember correctly, and then they ended up replacing him with Steve Kern, and I think there were, I don't recall everything in the past. Maybe I got hit in the head too much, but I think there were several Doinks besides Steve Kern and Matt Bourne. I think Steve Lombardi was also a Doink the
Yeah.
Clown.
And a guy named Ray Apollo played the babyface Doink in later years.
Right.
Yeah, but Matt was the one that really got it over. But that explains it. If he had those issues and left the company, that's probably why.
Yeah. Again, he was our business was like a fraternity. We respected each other, and we try to help each other on the road. And you know, uh, when you saw guys that were going through problems, you try to help them. And you know, when somebody's addicted to a drug, and I've often talked about this. A lot of the reasons that I feel a lot of the guys were addicted to drugs is because we were working like dogs. Cocaine was a drug that made you feel like you had slept 20 hours. So, you take a little bump and you feel like you had slept 20 hours. And uh, like I said, we were traveling and working 350 days a year, and it was tough.
There's a fan on here that's wondering any memories of wrestling in Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio was another fantastic place to wrestle. It wasn't one of the biggest arenas, but you would have 6,000-7,000 people in there, and it sounded like you had 20,000 people. Ohio had great, great, great fans, and I started going to Ohio when I was with in Atlanta, wrestling for Atlanta before I came back to New York in '83. And Atlanta was Ohio was really hot. Tommy Rich and uh, God, I can't remember who was another heel there that had great feuds with Tommy. Uh, the places would sell out all over the place.
The Dave Kruger wants to know your memories of the El Matador vignettes where you were training to be a bullfighter. Were they shot in Mexico? And what was it like doing those bullfighting vignettes?
Uh, the vignettes to me were done very well, and I think the fans were really buying into those vignettes. I was supposed to come out with a big feud with the $1 Million Man. When I came back, I was promised a big feud, and all of a sudden I came back. All of a sudden, there's no feud with the $1 Million Man, and uh, everything that I did really ended up meaning nothing. That's what I never really liked the El Matador because it was a lie the whole way, and I was promised a big push, for another run, and I never got it, and I just decided I didn't want to be on the road, after that.
Oh, so it was you that chose to leave the company then?
Yeah, I think I was one of the few that gave Vince McMahon, uh, I was I told him I had a meeting with him, and I said it's funny because I don't know if he did it because he didn't want to fire me because I had been there the longest of anybody. When I left, I had been there the longest, including Hulk Hogan. And I told Vince, I said, Vince, I think it's time for me to go. And he says, I think you're right. And I said, okay. And we shook hands. We left. I left in good terms, but there wasn't anybody who was given their notice to Vince. But I had a bunch of years, and hard years, and a lot of pressure after every WrestleMania. There was wrestlers getting fired, and I knew that they were not doing much to me, and I just didn't want to be around uh, doing jobs for everybody else. Everybody did jobs for everybody else. Everybody put people over. A lot of people put me over. So whenever I was asked to put somebody over, God, who put me over? There was I beat a lot of guys, and well, who am I supposed to say? No, all of a sudden I'm better than the other guys. So for me, it was just a business. But I just got to the point. I'm not going to go around being away from home and traveling like a dog and just making ends meet.
Yeah, because you weren't paid salary back then like they are today. You were paid based on the house. And I guess in those 93 years, the houses weren't always great for the house shows.
Uh, no, not there at the end. There at the end, you know, you're right. The houses weren't as good. Uh, a lot of times you'd end up working 7 days a week and maybe end up clearing $500 or $600, especially if you didn't save your, if you didn't split rooms and split travel, and uh, we still had the same expenses as we did when we were making the pretty good money when the houses were all sold out. So it just I looked around and I just said, to me it's not worth what I'm left with. It's not worth the stress that you have to go through, you know flying to a different city every day, getting a cab, getting a hotel room, getting your workouts in, because the workouts were very important to keep your body healthy. So it just got to the point where enough was enough for me.
Darshell wants to know if you ever wrestled Pedro Morales in your career.
I never wrestled against him. Him and I teamed up quite a few times towards the end of his career. Talk about somebody who had knowledge about the business, the psychology that he had, that I learned just talking to him about the business, going up and down the roads. We would, when I traveled with him, we'd share rooms, and he was a great guy, and he he always used to tell me, I can't believe, with so many Hispanics all over the world, every big city has tons and tons of Hispanics. He said that they should be doing more. Vince should be doing more with you. He couldn't believe that Vince didn't take advantage of and give me a bigger push. I think we discussed this the last time. Uh, to, there was a time when they were considering me to take the belt, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, I recall it was between you and Bret Hart, and for whatever reason, they went with Bret.
Well, uh, I think like Pat Patterson had been telling me that we were going to go into South America and Central America and Mexico and Spain. That's when they were considering me. That's when I ended up beating The Undertaker in Barcelona, Spain. I was getting wins over everybody, and I had been in the territory, so I knew when they were priming somebody. So I had heard the buzz, and I was just going along. And then I think the value of the peso was so bad. I believe that's one of the reasons that Vince decided not to go into South America and Central America and Mexico, full speed ahead. And, that's when they went to Bret Hart. But, it wasn't only Bret Hart. It was uh, the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. I found out later that Pat Patterson went and told him, Ted, it was between you and Bret. I'm sorry, but we went with Bret. That's what he told me. And I think there was a couple of other guys that Pat told it was between you and this guy, you and Bret, and we went with Bret. So a lot of bullshit in the business.
How was your relationship with Pat Patterson?
I had a good relationship with him. It was strictly business. I maybe that was one of the reasons I didn't get too close to the guys who were running the shows like Pat Patterson or Vince, or I wouldn't hang out and party with them. And I think it's what they wanted. They wanted guys to party with them. And I just it was a business relationship. I respected him, and they respected me, and that was about it.
Did you have a favorite agent to work with? I know it's not like today where they have the quote unquote producers going through the matches step by step with all the talent, but when you had to have an agent in charge of your match, was there anyone in particular you liked?
I don't know if you remember everybody. So Chief Jay Strongbow. I think that he was a brilliant guy. He would always add the little things to finishes to make the match work. Chief Jay Strongbow was not an easy guy to get along with. Uh, I had my differences with him, but as far as knowledge, and setting up finishes, because that's all they used to give us. They'd come and tell us, okay, this is who's going to go over, and this is what we want you guys to do, and then we start putting the pieces together for just for the ending. The rest of the match was ad libbed, but we knew how we were going to go into the finishes.
Mitch would like to know if you have any road stories you could share about Rick Martel.
Well, Rick Martel was, again, when we traveled together, he was a very easy guy to get along with. We had a lot in common. He didn't party like I didn't party, but I do remember one time we were in Michigan. We wrestled in Saginaw, Michigan, and we were staying. We'd fly into a center, big city, so we would fly into Detroit. And out of Detroit, we'd drive into 2 or 3 different cities, but our home base would be a hotel by the airport. And I never forget one time, right at midnight, New Year's, him and I, because we wore our white trunks and our white knee pads, and they would get really dirty, and we had to wash them every day. We'd scrape them with soap, and then we'd let them dry overnight. And we both of us were laughing, in the bathroom, washing our trunks and our knee pads, talking about how the big stars, bringing in New Year's Eve, washing our gear for the next day.
How did you like your music for Strike Force when it was Girls in Cars, I believe, at one point? They gave you a music video and everything.
That was a great music. I remember when we went to L.A. to tape the vignettes with I think it was a red Ferrari that we were in the car.
Yeah, I still remember that music video. It was pretty good. Do you still keep in contact with Rick Martel at all?
No, I bet you it's been a couple of years since the last time that I saw Rick, or maybe even longer. We didn't have a fallout. He just stopped making appearances. I have no idea. I do know that he was such a talented guy. And that's just me. Nobody has said this to me, but knowing Rick, he was such a talented guy. I wonder to myself, why is this guy not in the Hall of Fame when so many guys that couldn't carry his bag to the arena are in the Hall of Fame? So I believe that something went wrong between him and the office, either Pat Patterson or Vince. So, I mean, I never heard anything, but it's just something that I've always thought.
How did you like your feud against him? I remember actually you wrestled him on the very first house show I saw here in Ottawa, Canada in June 1989, and it was a really good match.
Well, we had similar styles. He was such a good worker. I just wished I considered Rick a better worker than Greg Valentine, and Greg and I, had a long feud. So I was anticipating. I said, "Man, this is made perfect for us. It's a perfect script. We could carry this and keep coming up with different finishes and just keep adding heat." And all of a sudden, the feud was over. I again, that's another thing that one of the things that I was lied to. I was expecting to get a longer feud, and it didn't happen. And the angle was hot. The people were buying it. He had a lot of heat when he left me in WrestleMania 5, and causing the reason for us to split up. And it was perfect.
Yeah, I don't think there ever was a blow-off match, was there? Just kind
No,
of.
they just stopped it. They just went from. They just dropped me is what happened.
You also had a lot of matches with Kurt Hennig. How is he to work with, and how was he outside of the ring?
Well, Kurt Hennig was a fun guy. He was, to me, one of the greatest heels in at the time. He was so good. Kurt Hennig, when I was in Minnesota in the AWA, he had his first match against me in a small town outside of Minnesota, outside of Minneapolis. I can't even remember the name of the town. But on his first match, I was just amazed, what a great talent he was. He Kurt liked to do a little partying, himself, but even though he partied, he seemed like he was always under control. He never overdid anything. In the ring, he was fantastic.
There's a fan on here that said he recently saw a match with you and Don Morocco that was very good. Any memories of working with him?
Well, Don Morocco was the Intercontinental Champion. I don't know how well you remember Don Morocco, but Don Morocco, when I came in '83, Jimmy Snuka was chasing him for the Intercontinental title, and the only reason that Jimmy didn't get the Intercontinental title, I believe, was because he was so messed up, and then the incident that happened with him. But Don Morocco he had like a cult behind him. He had fans that just loved him, and as a babyface, you always had I always had like 70% of the fans for me, and 30%, were loyal to Don Morocco. He had a great following, but as far as knowledge and whenever I wrestled, I was the baby face that always followed the heel. I let the heel call the match, and when there was time for me to do my own thing, I put my 2 cents in. The more experience I got, the more they allowed me to do. In reality, they really had no choice because uh, I was as good. My psychology was as good as anybody in the business. I'm not going to say mine was better than anybody else, but mine was as good as anybody else. And after a while, you learn to have respect for those type of guys. And there were so many of us that we'd go in there, and our job was to have a match, and to we'd go in there, and whether we were the main event or the semi-main event or in the middle of the card, every night we go in there with the intentions, and we had so many fans that we went in there to steal the show. I went in there, and I made it very difficult for the following match to follow my match.
Now, you mentioned Jimmy Snuka. I'm going to guess you were around in the company at the time where that incident with him happened. Did you pay any attention to it at the time, or because you were traveling around so much, was it just kind of like a rumor floating around and you just kept about your business?
Well, I'll never forget the incident. It was May 10th, 1983, because that was my first TV taping when I came back to New York the second time. And when I woke up in the morning, that's when I heard of what had happened. So I had no idea. I had never been in the territory with Jimmy Snuka, so I didn't know Jimmy, and I didn't. I had no idea what their relationship was like. I just knew that something happened, and uh, wrestlers just didn't talk about it. It wasn't something that was talked in the locker room. This happened, that happened. So it was hushed, hushed. Very, very few people know what really happened, and I don't know who those people are because I don't know who was with him, or it just wasn't talked about.
Yeah, it seems like now with wrestlers, they'll bring even more attention onto an incident like that rather than in the past they would just kind of like ignore it. If it had to do with one of the boys, it would just kind of be glossed over. So I don't know if it's better or worse the way it is now, but it seems like the wrestlers were more protective of each other back then.
Yeah, I like to be honest with you. I have no idea what I know. Uh, it was a lot. The dressing room was a lot more relaxed. Uh, from what I hear, the young wrestlers are not the same type of mentality as the wrestlers. I don't know. In the first place, they don't work anywhere near as much as we did, so they're protected more. I couldn't tell you what it's like to be in the locker room and or the mentality of the wrestlers. I just keep hearing that it's just not the same.
There's a fan on here that wants to know if COVID didn't happen, is there any reason why you wouldn't show up at any Mexican wrestling events because the Mexican fans still like you? Is this something that you would consider in the future?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't traveled anywhere since COVID, so it's been close to 2 years. And I was still strapping, the boots. I do think I'm going to strap on the boots a few more times. I don't know that I'm going to be flying anywhere. I'm 68 years old. I don't want to take any chances with COVID. I had it once. I really don't want to have it again. It wasn't fun. So there is, I still haven't put away my boots, and I still haven't claimed retirement. So I, you know, for the right price, I will eventually, make a trip or two, to hopefully to Spanish speaking towns. There's still a lot of wrestling fans who contact me who are Hispanic and who were big time fans of Tito Santana, and they always tell me that I was the only Hispanic in the WWE with a big name that they really looked up to, and it kind of makes me feel good. I don't know if I told you this the last time, but when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, that Eddie Guerrero was the world champion. I hadn't been following wrestling, because when I left. I wasn't going to go back. They tried to get me to go back a few times, but I just didn't. I was done with the traveling. But Eddie came and and thanked me for opening the doors for the Hispanics. And God, that made me feel good.
There's a fan on here that would like to know if you have any stories about Andre the Giant.
Oh my God, Andre the Giant was a big man, and I remember that I was with him in Hawaii one time, and we wrestled in Japan, and on the way back we stopped in Hawaii, and we got into a cab, and this Japanese driver was saying, "No, no, no, flat tire," because when Andre got in the front seat, he says, "Just drive." But Andre was, everybody knows that Andre liked his liquor, and you'd see Andre pretty much. You'd think that he had way too much to drink, but by the time he got to the ring, and he'd be laying, you'd think that he'd be passed out. And as soon as I said, "Andre, you're next," he'd get up and like nothing happened. He'd go in there and have a great match. He was to me the best big worker in our business. He had great ring psychology, and he could work with little guys, and he could work with the big guys, and he could carry a match.
Vander Star would like to know about working with Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Bobby the Brain Heenan. I first met Bobby the Brain Heenan in the AWA. I believe it was in 1980 when I went from New York to the AWA to wrestle for Vern Gagne, and he was a great heel. I had never even heard of Bobby the Brain Heenan, and then when you watch him do interviews and the way he managed at ringside, he didn't take away from the match, but whenever he had an opportunity, like when you would stump, he'd put his nonchalant, put his hand, not paying attention to what's going on in the ring, and the baby face would stomp on his hand. He was a master of that. For to get the baby face over, and he never tried to steal. He didn't want the heat on him. He wanted the heat on the heel that he was managing, and a lot of times nowadays the heels they think that they're the ones that need the heat, and it's not the way it works. It's the worker in the ring that needs the heat.
Roger F would like to know your opinion of Mil Mascaras.
Mil, I met Mil. I started wrestling in 1977, and in San Antonio, Texas, for Tully Blanchard, his father. And then Tully and I went to Tampa, and that's where I started training and breaking in the ring with Hiro Matsuda. But we wrestled in Houston. No, we wrestled in San Antonio, and then we drove to Houston. And I was driving, and Mil was traveling with me. And he always protected himself, and he wouldn't even take his mask in the locker room, and I was a real mark. I hadn't even been I refereed. I haven't even been smartened up, and I see him taking a shower with a mask on, and I said, "Man, this guy, he's unbelievable." And then we get in the car, and the guys would get on the road, and the first thing we do, we'd stop in a gas station where they would sell beer, and we'd pick up beer, and he would go in there with his mask on, and he wouldn't take his mask. He didn't take his mask on until we left the town, and then he took his mask off, and I said, "Man, this is not a bad looking guy. I wonder why he's wearing a mask." Because I always heard it always the guys that wore a mask were not, didn't look that good. But little did I didn't know that much about masks or not masks. But he had a lot of heat with the boys because Mil wouldn't do jobs for anybody, and a lot of the American guys didn't consider him to be one of the best workers in the world because he wouldn't sell. I mean, Mil Mascaras was not as big as I was, but he worked like he was 6'8". He wouldn't go down for people, and he'd sell very little, and a lot of the heels had a hard time, getting heat on him, and it was tough. But I respect him, because Mil Mascaras was demanding big bucks to make the shows, and the promoters, he drew money and they paid him.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. There's another fan on here, Rick Brooks, that wants to know if you ever wrestled Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer when you were in Georgia, and what are your thoughts on him?
Well, that's the one that I couldn't remember. Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, him and Tommy Rich used to have some fantastic matches, and they had. I only went in there for a little while when I left the AWA. I stayed there like 2 months. Oli promised me a big push that never happened, and thank God that's when I came back to New York. But again, Buzz Sawyer was there, and his brother, and he was, I mean, a great talker, a great heel. I mean, he take all kinds of crazy bumps, and again, another guy that just went way too early. I never partied with him, and but I do know that I know he used to be, he used to like to party hard, and he went pretty young.
How did you get along with the Ultimate Warrior backstage?
What was that?
How did you get along with the Ultimate Warrior backstage?
Well, it was funny because when the Ultimate Warrior first came to New York, he was pretty green. He came in as the Dingo Warrior, I think, was what they were calling him, before he got all the paint and stuff. And I mean, he was wide open for any advice, and teaching him how to work. He never learned how to work, uh, but he had a completely different attitude, and all of a sudden, uh, he got the big time push, and all of a sudden, the Ultimate Warrior came up, and he started getting pushed big time. And talk about a guy who I don't think he had a lot of respect for the business, because it came too easy for him. All of a sudden, he's making a lot of money, and uh, he he was a powerful guy. Weighed 280 pounds. Probably with a 33-inch waist, and very very strong guy. That in our business, we used to have a motto. You take care of my body, I'll take care of yours. Because if we didn't wrestle back then, we didn't get paid. And I can't tell you how many wrestlers used to complain about the Ultimate Warrior just not caring about anybody's body, and just potatoing the heck out of the guys. And the guys knew that Vince was really pushing him hard, so they didn't want to say anything against him. Luckily, I was a babyface, and I didn't have to work against him.
Yeah, I remember you teamed with him at least once. So that Survivor Series, back when they had the final match of Survival at Survivor Series 1990, I think it was.
Yes, that was. I mean, the the two hottest guys to me at the time in professional wrestling, and all of professional, was Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. I think by that time the Ultimate Warrior had overtaken Hulk. He was selling more merchandise than Hulk was, and he was over like $1 million. And for me to end up uh, in a six-man with those two guys, I mean, God, that to me that was the ultimate. That was the something very very special in my career, to be teamed up with them.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that is the greatest Survivor Series of all time still. And you were also the first entrant ever in the Royal Rumble with Bret Hart, and you've been in about, I think, 6 Royal Rumbles. Any memories of that and thoughts on being the first ever entrant?
Well, there again, being in there with Bret Hart, me and Bret were really good workers, and again, there was psychology, where you had to go in there, and it was going to be. I don't know how often the guys would get. I think every minute a new guy would come in. So we had to start the match, and it's almost like you had to go in there and have a comeback, uh, you know, but without the heel having the time to get the heat, to build the heat before Babyface made a comeback. We had to start with a comeback to get the people off their feet, until other people started coming. Then they would bring one more person in. But I would say for about the first 6 or 7 minutes, until you had about 8 or 10 people in there, uh, it was a full blown fight, and Brett and I were. Uh, we knew what we were doing. We had lasting win. We could go in the ring, and I think that we had a job to do, and I think we did a very good job on the first Royal Rumble.
Well, obviously, if it's still around in 2022, you guys set the tone for it. Did you ever wrestle Ric Flair in your career?
Yes, I had many matches with Ric Flair. Talk about a heel, a great heel. It's hard for anybody to say he was the greatest. I was the greatest. But I'm not going to say that Ric Flair was the greatest, but I'm going to say that I'm going to put him on the top three heels in the history of the business. And, in my era, uh, I mean, what a great worker. And you go to arenas or you go to events now where Ric Flair is at. I mean, the guy still has a following. He lived the life and he did it in the ring. And he was one of the best. And he gave his body, every night. And I just remember watching him against Harley Race and Steamboat, and when I was in Charlotte, and I just couldn't believe how these guys could go 1 hour matches night after night after night, and with Wahoo McDaniels and how they used to beat each other up, and it was amazing to me. But I don't know how many times he was the world champion, but I think he had it more than anybody else.
Oh yeah, he was up there for sure. With all the heels that you wrestled over the years, who was the heel that had the most heat overall?
The heel that had the most heat. God. I would say Roddy Piper had to be up there. And I don't know if you remember Mad Dog Vachon from the AWA. He was a Canadian. And Mad Dog Vachon used to say to me, the ring work is 10%, the interviews is 90%. And I know that you are a student of our business, and it was the interviews that sold the tickets, not what you did in the ring. It was the interviews that sold the tickets, and that you kept. It was like a soap opera that kept telling the soap opera week after week after week. And I don't know if you agree with me, but I don't know that anybody did it better than Piper.
Yeah, and as a baby face in the ring, it makes it easier for you, I guess, when a heel like Piper has all that heat. I guess you don't have to do quite as much in the match because you already have the crowd.
No, I was working in Ohio. I forgot what. No, it wasn't in Ohio. It was in Syracuse, New York. We were in the ring, and I was the Intercontinental Champion, and the place was completely sold out. We were the main event, and Piper poked me in the eye, and I mean, really poked my eye, and I thought I was going to lose my eye. And I don't know if you've ever been poked in the eye, but the eye is the most painful part of the body. And I told Piper, I said, Roddy, I said, you got my eye. I said, I can't see. I don't know what's wrong. And he just put me in a hold, and he just said, Tito, just sit here, don't do anything. Let me know when you're ready to get back to doing anything. And we must have sat there with him. I think he had his hands underneath my chin and his knee in my back, and I wasn't even selling. I wasn't moving, and after about 5 minutes, I started getting my vision back, and I said, and the pain went away, and I said, okay, Hot Rod, I said, I'm back, and then we finished the match. But the guy was totally under control in the ring. I mean, he was a master.
Ivan Santos says you wrestled on the first ever WWE card in Puerto Rico. Any memories of that? I heard personally that there was a lot of heat at that time with the Puerto Rican company that didn't want WWE coming over there.
There was a lot of heat. I remember getting there, and it was the biggest rainstorm that I had never wrestled in the rain, and I was going to wrestle I did wrestle Randy Savage, and the mat was plastic. So I told Randy, I said, Randy, we're not going to do anything. I'm not going to take any chances. So we just grabbed a hole, and most of the match, was in the ring. We weren't going to take any chances because you weren't going to have. I think we had maybe 25 people in the stands. Uh, uh, I met some of the Puerto Rican wrestlers because they were friends in the arena, and I told them, guys, we're just employees. The only reason we're not here, the only reason we're here is because Vince told us, booked us here, and we have no choice. We either show up and keep our jobs or stay home and get fired. And they understood, but we never went back because whoever ran that show lost a lot of money because they didn't expect the kind of rain that they got, and they didn't drew any money, but they still had to pay the WWF whatever fee they had for the card.
Gareth wants to know how you got along with Dynamite Kid.
I got along with Dynamite Kid. Thank God, they never pulled any ribs on me. Him and Davey Boy, they I don't know who liked to rib more. They pulled some pretty good ribs on some of the guys, but I think I respected everybody in the ring. I respected everybody in the business, and I think I earned everybody's respect. So thank God they never messed with me.
There's a fan on here that says one of the best matches he ever saw live was you against Randy Savage in Detroit in the 1980s. Any memories of your feud with Randy?
Well, Randy turned out to be one of the best heels. When Randy came into the territory, Randy came in not being a big league wrestler, did not have the gimmick, and before he got Elizabeth to manage him, Randy, we'd go out in the ring and wrestle. I remember wrestling him, and it was in Detroit, but I think it was before Elizabeth, and I let Randy call the match, and I threw like 8 drop kicks. Randy came from the South, where a lot of high spots were used in that territory. It was a wrestling territory. And after the match, I told Randy, I said, Randy, I let you call the match, and if you notice, we didn't get any response. I said, I threw more drop kicks tonight than I've thrown in a year here. I said, the fans in the WWF, they like a little bit of wrestling, and they like a fight. They want to see that you are angry at each other in the ring, and they want to see a fight. And let me tell you, it didn't take him long before Randy became one of the best. I mean, he picked it up. But, in my opinion, Elizabeth, to me, was responsible for Randy getting over as much. The part that she played as his manager, and the role, how he did it, how he handled it, and then what he did in the ring, how his work improved drastically, quickly in the ring. He became one of the best that ever went through the WWF.
Oh, without a doubt. There's another fan on here that wants to know if you have any memories of George the Animal Steel.
George the Animal Steel was a great, great wrestler. He was a football coach somewhere in Detroit. So he was a teacher. And when I met George, when I came into New York, George was leaving to go back. He would only wrestle in the summers, and he was going back to coaching, to teaching. And he told Vince that he wanted to work with me, and I worked with him all around the territory, day in and day out. I was not used to uh, anybody like George. Uh, and he would say, just Tito, just let me do my stuff and just follow me. So I would just let him do his stuff and follow him. Talk about somebody who knew the gimmick that he had, who got the most out of the gimmick and those turnbuckles, and eventually ended up being one of the hottest baby faces in the WWF. But outside of the ring, I mean, he was the nicest guy in the world, and he became an agent, and he was with the company for many, many years, and it was sad. He had gotten sick before he left the WWF, and he had showed me some pictures of what he was going through, and uh, it was hard to see him leave the way he did. I miss a lot of these guys.
A long story short wants to know if you have a favorite Mexican soccer club.
A Mexican soccer club. I am not a soccer fan because I came from Texas. I don't know the game. We didn't have it in school, but whenever they have those big tournaments on television, I forgot what they call the big tournament that they have where all the countries go against each other. Uh,
The World Cup, possibly.
yeah, Mexico is I always pull for Mexico.
And last fan question I'll ask for today. This fan saw you wrestle the Warlord at the Nassau Coliseum back in the 90s. Any memories of wrestling in Long Island?
Nassau Coliseum, to me, those fans were the wildest fans anywhere. I mean, those fans, if they loved you, they were behind you, and they loved Tito Santana. Uh, Again, I wrestled against the Warlord. He was a big guy. He came into the territory. They put him with me, and uh, he did not know how to be a heel. So in the ring, I would call the spots for him because he was afraid to talk in the ring. He was afraid the fans would see him, because it's an art to be able to call a match without the fans seeing you. And then I would have him call the spot back to me, and then we would do the spot. And then I would do the next spot, call the next spot, and then he would call. And then I have him call it back to me. And the Warlord turned out to be a pretty good worker at the end. The same thing happened with his partner. God, what was his partner's name?
Barbarian.
Barbarian. It took some learning for them to Barbarian and I. He laughs a lot because one of the first times that I wrestled a Barbarian, he grabbed a hold. I reversed the hold the arm, and I was twisting his arm, and I said, Barb, grab the rope, to grab the rope so I could release the hold. So the referee would make me release the hold, and the Barbarian says to me, "Oh no, Tito, that's chicken." So I said, "Okay." So we went, when the match was over, we went in the dressing room, and I said, "Barb, that's the whole point. You look like you could kill me, And for you to be a heel and to have to use the rope for the referee to break the hold, that would make you a coward. That's what you want as a heel. And every time I see him now, he always laughs about that. But again, he was another one that I mean turned out to both of those guys turned out to be great heels.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, is there anywhere that fans could buy merchandise of yours or order your book or order autographs if they want to look you up online?
They could go on Facebook, and I still have a few T-shirts and I have books. And if they want to order, send for 8x10s, for me to sign autographs. I do it through mail, and I think on Facebook I'm on my real name, Merced Solis. So if they can send me a message on Facebook, I'll start contact with them and send them a book or T-shirts or 8x10s.
Great. And do you have any other social media other than Facebook where they could
No,
follow you?
that's the only. I tried Twitter and I got hacked, and somebody started putting some really bad stuff in there, and I just dropped it and never went back.
Yeah, the social media could be a cruel world out there, but thanks a lot for your time today. It's always an honor and a pleasure talking to you. I'll let you close this off with whatever message you want to tell the fans.
Well, Hannibal, I think that you have one of the best podcast shows that I've been part of, that I've listened to throughout. You have a great fan base, and like always, I just want to let the fans know that I am so grateful because the fans continue to support me. I do cameos, and I can't tell you how many cameo shout outs I get requested uh, from Canada. And it always, it's, I probably get more excited when I do a shout out for a fan in Canada than I do from anywhere else. And I'm getting them from all over the world. But for some reason, Canada is so dear to me. I always love the fans because the fans in Canada, they were hard. They just didn't start cheering for you just because you stepped into the ring. You had to earn their respect. And but once you got them, I mean, they were behind you, and they continue to support me, and I'm so grateful. And if I'm ever around anywhere, please come by and visit me and say hi. I love talking to the fans, and take care of yourselves. Don't get the virus. Stay healthy. Arriba!
When you spoke to your dad at WrestleCon, was he more open to you than in the past? How did that happen anyways? We had an author. I think you may or may not have seen it, but
Yeah, I did see
the
it.
guy witnessed it, and he had done an interview with Tito, so he was. I'm curious to read that part of his book. Supposedly, he asked him about you.
Yeah, so I saw the show with the guy on. I'm sorry that I forget his name right now. I could.
Yeah, six pack of the journey to WrestleMania, something like
Yeah.
that is his book.
So when you interviewed him, he said Tito was visibly annoyed when I walked up to him, and I laughed so bad because that is a very accurate description of what his face showed when I did walk up to him. And so he was at WrestleCon, and he was there all 3 days like I was. And initially, someone must have reached out and was like, is this okay if Jenny comes because Tito's coming? And I'm like, why would he care? Because we had a conversation maybe like 2 years ago or a year. Yeah, like 2 years ago in Jersey. And he was like, yeah, I want to support your wrestling. Anything I can do to help, just let me know. That was the extent of it. Like, he didn't really want to get to know me, but he's like, yeah, if I can support you, and like gave the okay. Was great with having like the name Jenny Santana. That's great. But then like it's still the same thing. And I think the author even talked about it in his book, if I remember correctly, of how his wife didn't want him to pursue a relationship. And so now we're here, God, it probably like years later, like it's a bunch of years later, and it's still the same thing. Like, so he still doesn't want to pursue a relationship because his wife doesn't want him to pursue a relationship. I don't know why. So that's just, he's like, if the time ever comes, but she's never gonna be okay with it. I'm not sure why she's not okay with it. Like, the facts are the facts. I have my suspicions of why she's not okay with it, but I don't really know.
Yeah, it was interesting because the one interview with the captain that he actually let me post on here that I know you saw, when he was asked about you, he acknowledged it and everything, but then in the same conversation, he said, "Yeah, I never really made any money and all this, but it's not like you're even asking for money." But he
Yeah.
did make a lot of money, and he was also a teacher for years with probably a teacher's pension, and he's smart. He's not one of these guys that wasted all of his money. So that's a good answer, but it's like you're not even after that. You just want to like get to know him a bit, I guess. So it's
Yeah,
just
so
funny
that
that
was
he's
the preemptive thing, was like, I don't have any money. I'm pretty sure when I called him and the very first time we spoke, like that was the first sentence out of his mouth was, I don't have any money. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm a grown woman who has my own money. I'm not asking you for money. And it was pretty sad that he even kind of thought that. But I was like, first of all, if we wanted money, we would have came after you in the 80s, right? When you were on top of the world winning WWE. So that clearly wasn't what I was looking for. But I wanted to give him the chance to get to know him. He has 3 sons, and of his 3 sons, I will say, I think that I probably am almost the most, not the most like him, but went down a similar path to him. I know that one of his sons played football, but then had a knee injury and didn't play anymore. But I would say, like, of his 3 sons, like, I'm the most athletic still to this day. And so I think I share a lot of qualities with him. And so, I think I've said this numerous times, like, you always have the debate, like, nature versus nurture. Usually nature will win. And so, the thing is, we share DNA. I have similar qualities to him. So it would have been nice to get to know him and like see that connection, I guess, and kind of maybe develop a relationship and grow, since I don't know, like, we are similar. We share things, and I went into wrestling, he was a wrestler, but not only that, like, I was an athlete well before I even thought about wrestling. Had I found out about him a long time ago, I'd probably be a professional wrestler full time. I don't know, but I feel like I have a lot of qualities similar to him, like life path. And I was working in education, and so just those similarities that have happened, that are present without ever getting to know him, or until here's your biological father. Oh, that makes sense because we have this, and this in common. So
you look like you could be his daughter, but it's
yeah.
true. It's too bad because like you're the only uh I guess kid that has interest in wrestling, for instance, and could actually like keep the name out there a bit and kind of get like you think he'd be proud. You're a judo or a grappling world champion. You're
Yeah.
gorgeous, and you're into wrestling. You're getting bookings on your own, pretty much through contacts you've made.
In
And
spite of him. Even. It's so nuts.
I hope he actually comes around because you're a nice person, and I know you don't hold that against him like too badly compared to some people. But and I hope that he can come around, like maybe if more of the fans get on his case about it.
Yeah,
'Cause
I mean, I think that it's funny because even reading the book, like when you read the book that guy wrote, you'll see that he portrayed himself a certain way. And I think in the book, I'm not going to say the exact quote, but the author said he like bought into his own hype about being the babyface Tito Santana. And I think that's 100% true. Like, he's been playing the role of Tito Santana for so long. Like, things he did in his personal life, he just disregards them or ignores them if they don't go along with that. So it's strange, and I don't know.
Apparently, they talked about it on the Chris Jericho podcast too, so maybe you'll have to actually listen to that. That's pretty cool that Chris Jericho must have talked about you. Did you hear about this?
No, I didn't. I'll definitely have to watch it though.
But he's saying the same thing. He was conflicted because of his image, so he almost doesn't want to acknowledge. Yeah. I mean, I like him, but it's like from my interactions with him. But as a friend of yours and someone that was also adopted, like, I never knew my family either until a few years ago. I can understand how you feel. At
this point, like, it's how many years later? If he's been married to his wife for 40 some years, if me coming in the picture kind of ruins that foundation, then that's a little bit sad.
Two of the most exciting and the most dominant tag teams of the late 1980s were the Hart Foundation and Strikeforce. We took Jim the Anvil Neidhart of the Hart Foundation and put him in the ring with Tito Santana of Strikeforce 20 years after their infamous feud. What would happen? Would old tempers flare up again? Would there still be that animosity? Well, take a look for yourself as Tito Santana faces Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
Who can complain, ladies and gentlemen? We've got two of the best of all time. Not only do we have Tito Santana, who was a former Intercontinental Champion, we've also got Jim the Anvil Neidhart, a member of the legendary Hart Foundation, made famous, obviously, right here in Canada, in Calgary, by Stu Hart, Bret Hart, Owen Hart, every member of the Hart family right here in Canada. Being an Oklahoman as I am, learning these things.
Very exciting for a lot of people. They got the chance to meet these two legends at intermission, and lots of photos, lots of autographs. Really, that is what professional wrestling is about, getting the opportunity to meet your heroes, both past, present, and future, up close and in person, because how many people can say they got the chance to shake hands with a Tito Santana or a Jim the Anvil Neidhart in the past 20 years? An absolute honor to have both of them here, and both of them were very excited when I spoke to them in the back about the opportunity to participate in the show tonight. And welcome back to you, Mark the Shark DiCarlo. Better late than never, I guess, but I wish you'd stayed away.
I was taking care of some Shark Tank business along with some Karachi Vice business, Plevitz, and it was none of your business, so shut the hell up. Nobody's really interested in what you have to say about anything anyways. But anyways, Chico Santana here at the Bad News Allen Tribute Super Show against the legendary Jim the Anvil Neidhart. And you know what, Jeff Jackson, look at the physiques, look at the shape that the two of these WWF legends are in.
I know, it's almost like a flashback to 1987. These guys look exactly like they did a little over 20 years ago.
Well, you know what? And now Tito Santana extending a peace offering to the Anvil, trying to shake hands, and the Anvil is having nothing to do with that. That's definitely not in the playbook of former Oakland Raider and Dallas Cowboy Jim Neidhart.
You know what? Show of sportsmanship is always good in this business, but apparently there is a lot of bad blood, if you will, between both Tito Santana and Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
You know what, guys? It's almost 20 years to the day that Strikeforce, the tag team of Tito Santana and Rick Martel, took those WWF tag team straps from the team of the Hart Foundation, Bret the Hitman Hart and Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
And in an instant, who beat Strikeforce, Demolition, were recently on a show reuniting at an autograph session in Windsor, Ontario, and Tito Santana was on that as well. So it's funny how one of the things that was commented on is the fact that despite leaving the business effectively and losing touch with a lot of people, when you get back together with your friends from that era, it's like things never change, and you can bet that it's very exciting for these two. It's like probably they never stopped facing off.
Well, you know what, guys? Jim the Anvil Neidhart is paying tribute as well in this very ring tonight on the Bad News Allen Tribute Super Show to his brother-in-law, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith. As you can see, Jeff Jackson and Jason Klevitz, Jim the Anvil Neidhart brandishing the elbow pad of the British Bulldog. And as I look around the arena, the British Bulldog's son, Harry Bulldog Smith, in attendance tonight, and Diana Hart in attendance tonight. And it does my heart well to see Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Tito Santana. And here's the Anvil with his trademark maneuver of pulling down his straps. He's got the side headlock on Tito Santana. And usually when Neidhart takes those straps down, it's the beginning of the end for his opponent.
Means he's getting ready to drop the anvil, if you will.
And he's a strong guy. I mean, he threw that anvil as a former football player. He is a strong man. I mean, literally the phrase strong man applies to Jim the Anvil Neidhart. When he's got that cinch around your head, that's like being crushed by an anaconda.
Well, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but did Jim the Anvil Neidhart was he not aptly named after throwing the anvil?
Absolutely. It was Stu Hart who actually took Jim the Anvil Neidhart when he started in Stu Hart Stampede Wrestling and took him down to the Stampede, the Calgary Exhibition and Stampede. And in those days, they had strongman competitions, and Stu took Jim Neidhart down, and he actually entered into the anvil toss. And there's the story and the history behind the name Jim Neidhart has, the anvil.
We got quite the action going on right now as Anvil wrapping his big arm around Tito Santana's head. Nice little headlock that he's got applied there, trying to make Tito Santana possibly submit.
Well, you know what, guys? Jim the Anvil Neidhart traveled all day from his home in Tampa Bay, Florida, to get here. 2 stops, one in Raleigh, North Carolina, the other one in Salt Lake City, Utah. And you know what? A couple of nights ago, in front of 27,500 people at a Tampa Bay Devil Ray Major League Baseball game, had a match against another former WWF legend, Greg the Hammer Valentine. He twisted his knee, and before he got on the flight this morning, he had his knee drained to be on the Bad News Allen Tribute Super Show, because many will not remember that in Stu Hart Stampede Wrestling, Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Bad News Allen started their professional wrestling careers the same year.
Wow, now that is impressive. I did not know that.
Absolutely. It's amazing what you can learn at any given time from the Shark.
Which in turn, I'm sure you learned from Jim himself.
The only thing I've learned tonight, Klevitz, is the level of your stupidity. What the hell is going on here? I believe referee J. Edgar Hooker has counted out both Jim the Anvil Neidhart and Tito Santana, a double count out, and that means we have a draw.
Well, that doesn't settle things.
I don't think it settles anything.
A few 20 years in the making, and they're counted out. I guess that's the hatred between the two of them, but I guess maybe in another 20 years we'll see them again trying to settle things.
And I think the crowd here at the Spray Lakes Arena in Cochrane on the Bad News Allen Tribute Super Show, Jason Klevitz, is absolutely stunned that referee J. Edgar Hooker got to that 10 count. Well, Jason Klevitz, the fans here at the Bad News Allen Tribute Super Show, exceedingly, how shall I put it, off at the finish of this match. Referee J. Edgar Hooker has counted out both legends, Tito Santana and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, and it's like the proverbial kissing your sister. There's no satisfaction with the end of that match.
Ladies and gentlemen,